All right. Can you see my screen? You can? Yes?
Yes, I can see your screen.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. Hey, we're going to go ahead and get started. This is Zoom session 7 for 605. We are well into the semester, so I want a couple of things. First of all, I was going to ask about the hurricane. I'm glad that you haven't had any problems, and I hope that the rest of our colleagues haven't had it as well. Couple things I want to remind you, a couple of announcements to put on your calendar. You should have gotten this. If not, it's there. October 15th. Excuse me. October 15th, which is this week. If you have not registered or notified the registrar's office that you are planning to graduate in December, then you make sure you need to do that, because after October the 15th, that deadline is passed. So please, if you have not done that, contact the registrar as soon as possible. October 15th, the last day to apply to be a December graduate, and that requires, and that's everyone, whether you're a add-on or you are seeking the full degree. So don't forget that. Also, you got an invitation to this, but on October 24th, there is a Ask Dean Bull session. Dr. Bull will be Zooming with folks at 7 o'clock on October the 24th, where you can ask him anything that you want to. Dr. Bull, Prince Bull, is the new dean for the School of Education here at Gardner-Webb and doing a great job, and this is a way in which he can reach out and meet folks. So those are the two big announcements. So let me move on to do a little talking about Blackboard. A couple of things I just want to remind you in Mail 605 to bring us up to speed on, just remind you this is week 7. And some of the things we're going to talk about tonight are task, relationship behaviors, transformational leadership. I have 2 really neat things here for you that I've added. These are not something that you have to read or anything, but these are just some neat resources. Number 1 is getting to know your public schools. And whether you're in North Carolina or South Carolina, this will give you some really nice stuff when you begin to think about writing your dissertation, which I hope all of you are going to be back at Gardner-Webb when you finish this degree and will want to have a bigger degree or your doctorate degree from Gardner-Webb. But anyway, this is a great site. Getting to know your public schools really deals into 7 different revealing numbers about the public schools. I think you will like that. The other thing that's in your report now is understanding the EESA. The EESA is, of course, this is by the Department of Education. Dr. DeVos, or oh, she's a doctor or not, I don't think she is. Betsy DeVos put this together. The reason I like it, it's not political, which you would have expected from her department, but it really is for parents, a better understanding of the Every Student Succeeds Act. So it's written on a parent guide. So it's probably on a level that it is on a level that parents could understand. Something you may want to use with parents, or certainly use it as a guide. It really speaks to most components of the EESA. And again, it's in a great little format where parents could understand it, and perhaps some of your staff could as well. So use that as a resource. The other thing I want to remind you of, we are halfway through. Next session will be the halfway point of this particular course. So I want to remind you to keep looking at and I keep looking, and everybody is doing their homework, everybody's turning in things. So just keep abreast of that so we won't have any surprises, and at the last minute we have a lot of work to do. So that's Blackboard. And so now I'm going to move ahead and talk about some of the things tonight that I wanted to talk with you about, and that is situational leadership. How do you know when people are ready for that leadership, and non-directional behaviors? So let's go ahead and get started. I want to start here with that's not what I wanted. From the beginning. All right, I want to talk about supervisory behaviors from the Fowler book. Just walk you through a couple of things. And first, of course, this is coming from the chapters that you were asked to look at and to read. And this whole book is really about situational leadership. But in the chapters, he defines what supervision is. And of course, you and I all know that supervision is really overseeing the ability to help people do the job that they've been hired to do. Supervision is also being able to identify the weaknesses, being able to identify the resources that people need. So it's really not a process. It's just this whole conglomerate of things that is a responsibility of the supervisor or the leader. And a great supervisor understands that, no, it's not just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. It's just developing the whole person or that people to meet the goals of the organization. So a lot of it has to do, of course, with the organization. So I was going to ask for some examples from your roles, but since we have such a small crowd tonight, I'm going to move on with the next slide. We're going to talk about non-directive behaviors a little bit more tonight, but they are some of the behaviors that we observe or we have behaviors as a supervisor. There's collaborative behaviors, which we'll talk about a little bit more later on, directive informational behaviors, and directive control behaviors. You can tell from the directive informational behaviors, that's a topic that, again, I will hopefully we'll address a little bit later on in the course. Very directive, very much sharing information and hoping people's behaviors improve there. Directive control measures is a little bit different in that this is really kind of like more of a telling you what you need to do. All right, so let's talk a little bit about non-directed behaviors to begin with. A non-directed behavior it works for most of your employees. And when you become a principal or assistant principal, you're going to find that this is the model, this is the behaviors that you can exhibit that will probably be used the most in your day-to-day job. Non-directed behaviors. Because it is based on the assumption that those teachers that you hire, those people that you have working in your building, that they really do know what they're doing. Not only that, but they have a good sense of this is what needs to be done, and they don't have to be told, and they can act independently on their own to get things done. So we would like to think that we could use non-directed behaviors with 100% of our staff. Realistically, it's not that many, but it should be most of them. Because again, teaching is a profession, and the folks who've gone into teaching should have a little bit of an understanding of what is expected of them and what they need to do. That's the whole purposes of the training that they should have gotten in college in their teacher education program. For you as a leader, that's the purpose of your advanced degrees. That's the purpose of taking coursework. That's the purpose of doing those capstone projects that we're requiring of you to do, is because we want you to be in that position where when you go into that first principalship or assistant principalship, you're all set, ready to go. In a non-directed behavior, the decision really does belong with the teacher, and you as the supervisor or you as the leader are trying to get that person to make the right decision, but that decision rests with the teacher. Your job is to help her or him think through the process and to understand the consequences of her actions or his actions, and to help them hopefully adopt actions that will be productive to the organization. So some of the traits that you would use as a supervisor in a non-directed behavior, and again, this is 95 or 90% of the teachers and teacher assistants who you'll be supervising. One, of course, here's some of the things that you need to do. Basic observation, just observing them, helping them along the way, just kind of checking in on them just to see what they need. You'll have to do some interpretation, because no matter how great they are, or no matter how well they know their job, sometimes there are going to be some changes or some new things that come along that are going to require a little bit of interpretation from you. They're going to come to you and they're going to say, hey, Ms. Principal or Ms. Assistant Principal, tell me kind of what you think I ought to be doing on this, because as the world of education changes, they're going to have some interpretation from you. The good folks are going to want to know, what do you want? What do you want and how can we get there? And they're going to be open to new ideas. They're going to be open to looking at new things, and therefore will want your honest opinion on it. You're going to have to identify the problems and identify the solutions when they bring them to you. Again, all you're trying to do is to help them arise and arrive at that right decision that's best for kids. Here are some of the examples of non-directed behaviors. Again, this is where you really are kind of backing off and you're being that support, that facilitator. Eye contact is important. Asking the probing questions, and if we get time, we'll have a little example tonight of non-directed behavior interaction between two teachers. Your facial expressions and paraphrasing. You all probably are much too young to remember Madeline Hunter, but Madeline Hunter developed something called a 6-step lesson plan that when I was a teacher and when I first started out in administration, that was how North Carolina developed its teacher observation model based on those 6 steps. And so all of that had to do with many non-directed behaviors, observing those. So when you went into the classroom or when you're having that conversation with that teacher and you're giving them feedback, a lot of your body language, a lot of those kinds of things are important. But the thing that Madeline Hunter stressed on me the most was to ask probing questions. Is it going out here as well for the Zoom, Lynette?
It was just a blank. We can still see it though.
Oh, okay. You just can't hear me?
Right, I didn't hear you just now.
Okay. Let me type this. Okay. All right, I'll keep going. If we it'll be all on Zoom, so we can go back and look at it if somebody misses something. So, all right. So these are some of the things. Madeline Hunter, very big on it. Probably the very beginning of her career. The other things about non-directive is there's a continuation of behaviors, and as you begin to have these conversations with teachers, and it's not just about the evaluation time. It's about the times when you go in the classroom, when she invites you, or he or she invites you into the classroom to see something that they're doing. Here are some of the non-directed behaviors that you use with that 90 to 95% of your teachers. Again, these are folks who know what they're doing. They really are good. And so when they have interactions with you, it's usually for clarification. So the first important thing, of course, is to listen. I am the world's worst about this. When I was a principal and even as a superintendent, when somebody came to me, I am just sitting there thinking while they're talking to me, okay, let's get to what it is that you want me to do. And that's not the way most people approach a supervisor. Most people, when they approach the supervisor, and you may not be like this, you may be more like me, but most people, when they approach the supervisor, there's usually some small talk. There's usually some, I'd call it chit-chat, but just something basically establishing that you are listening and establishing that relationship and that opportunity at the time. I have always been one of those that, and I don't want to, and it is a fault, so I hope none of you have it. But I have always been one of those that's kind of thinking, okay, the weather's great, mom's fine, let's get to what it is that you need from me. And oftentimes, I would say, okay, that's great. Now, what is it that you would want? Or how can I help you? Something like that nature. Really cutting them off, which is not appropriate. You really need to listen, even getting beyond that initial 1 or 2 pieces of conversation, so to make them feel good. Once they are onto the topic that they want you to be involved in, really, you got to wait until they say what they need to say. And then, unlike me, you've got to put aside your particular judgment. Like if they're coming to you with a problem, you may already have in your mind the way to fix that problem or select the solution. You got to avoid doing that. You really need to listen to them with an open mind, not with here's what you need to do, because that's not non-directed. That's directed when you come out and say, here's what you need to do. Stop and listen. Give them their fullest attention. Put down your phone. Don't be looking over the shoulder. Be gracious enough to go through the little few minutes or seconds of just establishing relationship, and then listen to what they have to say. That point, Madeline Hunter and all the non-directive research says, reflect on it. Though you probably have done this a million times, but you just verbalize your understanding. I think I heard you say, or is this what you're trying to say? So really, you are trying to put it back out there to make sure that in communication that you have heard what they wanted you to hear. So the first step, of course, is to listen. The second is to reflect on it, to repeat it, and not to at that point jump in and say, oh, I got an idea, or here's my opinion on it. So again, step 2, reflecting, here's what I think you said. Step 3 is clarifying in case it is not exactly what they said, or if they come back and say, well, that's kind of it, but then you really need to start probing and asking for a little bit more details. And even at that point, beginning and to guide that teacher to reframe their conversation, to reframe the problem, to put it in a different way. So that is a two-folder in that it helps you better understand what they're trying to say, but it also helps them to narrow in or focus in on what it is they want your help with. Again, no questions. Basically, you're trying to get them to the point where they are really able to verbalize what it is they're wanting from you. And the last one, of course, and the part of after that is encouragement, leaning in, showing that you're listening, and beginning to kind of trying to encourage that teacher to share everything and to share all the bits of information that they need at the time. Key important point at this time is not to praise the teacher. That could be seen as condescending or not really a real not a real leadership skill. All right, so at any point during this conversation or this classroom observation or anything, you want to keep reflecting. So you're constantly, even as they begin to reflect better and better and begin to narrow in on what they say, you're constantly asking paraphrasing questions. You really do want to make sure that person understands that you want to know what they're saying. And you're trying to check the accuracy of what you believe they said. There are so many times in communication and in language that I swear I told you that, or I swear this is what I meant when I said this to you, but when you walk away from me, it's something completely different. So that's the purpose of this, is if we really want to be helpful, we got to really truly understand what it is they're asking us to do. And then you go into the problem-solving stage, and this is for the non-directive leadership. You know, you throw out some consequences. You throw out some possible solutions, and then you have the teacher move toward even more possible solutions. So at this point, you are still relying heavily on the teacher to begin to think through the problem. So you've kind of put the problem back on their shoulder, but you have set some parameters by explaining some of the consequences of this, consequences of that. A lot of people would say this is when you really begin to kind of narrow in, and what you are doing is you are leading them to an answer, but consider it like a funnel, because as you begin to say, we can't do, this is a problem on this side, this is a problem on this side, you really are narrowing them into that common understanding and to that common solution that at some point, as you begin to narrow in, they're going to come to that conclusion. So that's problem solving. But the teacher, again, is responsible for this. They're the ones who want to move from possible solutions to probable solutions. And they'll do it. Teachers are very good at this. They deduct what they need to do. Then you present it. You ask them for a commitment. You ask them to be very specific about what they want to do, what actions they can do, how we'll know that it's going to be done. You begin to make sure that they are accountable for that as well. And then the standardization, again, you're trying to put them into a time frame. We're going to have it done by this, and the criteria for the action. And then before you leave, the last step, of course, is to restate that teacher plan to make sure you understood it, they understood it, and then that person's going to go for it. Now, they don't include it in this model, but of course, there's an understanding that as a part of the reflecting, you are going to want to go back at some point and monitor as well. The monitoring is not to make sure, well, it's two purposes. One is to make sure that they're following the plan, but it is also to make sure that that plan is still workable. Situations may have changed. The teacher may have gotten a better understanding, a better feel for something, and so parts of the plan aren't necessary. So again, the feedback is that reflecting and re-reflecting through feedback. So those are some of the non-directive continuum of behaviors. Now, there are some things that I want to caution you about with non-directive behaviors. Of course, You have got to be non-judgmental. You have got to stay out of trying to influence them. I mean, you really have to step back and take off that leadership hat and just say, and it is so hard to do this. I'm trying to think through the hundreds of times that I've had to do this, and I'm sitting there thinking, I could have had the solution 2 seconds into what you said. That would be my solution, and it wouldn't always work, and it probably would not work in that teacher situation. But as a supervisor, you may also be thinking, oh my God, lady, do you know what you think? Do you know what you're going to, what this solution you have, do you have any idea what kind of problems you're going to have with it? I mean, did you really think through it? There's just a natural tendency when we deal with others that if they do not rise to the level that we expect them to, that we're judgmental. And you cannot do that, even if that person is all over the board with these kinds of proposals and they're trying to refine it. Remain non-judgmental and try not to influence it, because truly you do want them to arrive at that decision. Now, the one way in which you can help them do that is, of course, through narrowing the parameters that we talked about a little bit earlier. The second problem may be when the teacher or the group desires your input, you try to stay out of it. Again, you're trying to lead them toward, you can provide some of those parameters, some of the things that here may be a consequence, but you really do try to lead them to that. Then the problem is, what do you do as a supervisor when the group is reluctant or not capable of generating the solutions? Well, at that point, you probably need to move from something other than non-directive supervision. You probably need to move to a little bit different model. So we'll talk about that a little later as well. How exact or variable is the sequence of non-directive behaviors? I would say that if you follow the model, the 9 or so that we presented, it probably works best that way. And there are times when, of course, you do not want to use non-directed behaviors. And that, of course, that would be, when to use non-directed behaviors. And that's when the teacher of the group is really high functioning. They are really got their stuff together. When they already know most of the knowledge, their expertise about the issues. And when you aren't, they may be the high school math department may come to you with an issue of where to place 8th grade math or algebra 1. If you're not a math major and you're not following the progression of math, then I would certainly rely more on those who teach it. So that's when you would use a non-directed behavior. You would use a non-directed behavior when the group has full responsibility for carrying out the decision and you don't have any. If they are planning something and you have no decision-making in it, then of course you want to use a non-directed behavior. Or when the group is committed to solving the problem and the problem really doesn't matter to you. It may be something small. It could be a grade level problem. It could be a grade a subject area problem. But again, when it really doesn't have a lot of impact on you or doesn't have an impact on the school or the organization that you're leading. So those are when you use non-directed behaviors. And again, I want to kind of stress that hopefully this is 90 to 95% of the teachers in your building and teacher assistants. These folks operate best when they're left alone with a little guidance from you, feedback, monitoring from you. But these are really the folks who know what they're doing. And as much as the colleges and the universities put into our teacher education programs, and I know we have a lot of problems sometimes in talking about are the colleges and all preparing teachers, but that's what they should be doing. And so when teachers come out of college, teacher assistants have completed their hours of work that they work on. They really should be the experts on this, and they should know what they're doing. So that's why about 95 or 90 to 95% of the folks should be okay with that. Now, in the chapter, it continues, and stop me if there's any questions. I'm trying to keep an eye on. Please don't tell me I turned off something. I'm still recording.
I see you, Dr. Stone. We just don't see your screen anymore.
All right. Okay, so let me go back to share. I am so glad you're out there. I feel like I'm talking to myself. All right. The chapter also talks about readiness. How do you and when do you know that your people are ready, or your staff members are ready for the kinds of leadership that you have? This was an interesting chapter, and this is really what this book is all about, situational leadership. And it talks about having the capacity. And this is the readiness index. This is when you know that your people are ready. Hey, Jason. Hey, oh, Jason, join us. These are when you know that your people are ready for the ability to move forward and to do a task. All right, capability is one of the factors, and that's when they are very capable. I mean, they have the various degrees of capability, but capability basically is that they can do the job or something very similar. They can not only do that job, but they can learn enough to transfer to another job. So they may have special training, but they really do understand the task, and this is a continuum, or their role. That's capability. Motivation is the second component of readiness, and motivation, of course, is how everybody knows what motivation is, but it is really whether or not you want to do the job. And some of it may depend on how level of competence or level of confidence in yourself. There are many folks out there who are extremely smart and who can really outperform all of us, but you can't get them on a stage, or you can't get them in front of a class or in front of colleagues to talk about something and to take that leadership role, because they lack the confidence in themselves, even though they have the ability. So motivation may be not only a matter of they just don't want to do it, but it also could be a matter of they just don't feel comfortable. Their confidence isn't there. Motivation is also related to the level of responsibility. A lot of it, this is a lot of the inner part of your employee, how motivated they are or lack of motivation, what they want to do and what they don't want to do. And some of that is, of course, driven by incentives. What kind of incentives do they have for task achievement? The carrot and the apple, or the carrot, what is it, carrot or the stick? So some of those motivations for task accomplishment, those all fall into motivation. So two parts of readiness: motivation and capability. Capability, can they do the job? Motivation, do they want to do the job? And all this was covered in the chapter. But the readiness index, really, there's 4 levels to it. Level 1, R1, we'll have the chart here in a second. R1 is when they are really not very capable. In other words, they just don't have the skills. And number 2, they don't have the motivation. I hope none of you ever work with people like this, but I can almost guarantee you that on your daily basis, there are several people in your building that are classified as R1. They don't know what they're doing, and they certainly don't care. Small group of people, because hopefully these are the ones who quit. These are the ones who get pushed out because it is easy to tell that they aren't capable and they don't have the motivation. And because we are in a profession, the low capability should have been taken care of by the colleges and the universities before they get out of those programs. So I hope you don't run into many of these, but I will almost guarantee you that you will at some point see some of these folks. And when you become that principal or the assistant principal, hopefully you won't have to deal with many of these people. The second level of readiness is R2, which means they are low capable, but they're highly motivated. These are people who come to you that don't quite have the skills, but by God, they really want to do it. They are motivated. These are probably some of the ones who, given a lot of guidance, and it would take a lot of your time, these are the folks who are really going to make a great employee for you and going to do a great job. The motivation, so the thing to overcome here is, of course, the capability. You've got to give them some opportunities to learn. Got to give them some opportunities, and they'll take them if they're high motivators. The R3, these are the high capabilities and the low motivation. I would say for your teachers in your building, this is probably the category that you're going to be most disappointed in when you become principal or assistant principal. These teachers who can really do it, but they have low motivation. Now, a lot of colleagues would say that might be our older teachers, but I don't really believe that. But there are some older teachers who are counting the clock, waiting until that 30th year, waiting until they can retire, who have really great abilities. Now, their great abilities may be well hidden by the fact that they're not motivated to do anything and they're just punching the clock. They really, this is the group R3 here that you're going to have the most challenge with in your schools, I do believe. And then the last group, high motivators, high capability, You are going to love these folks. These are high flyers. They're going to do whatever you want them to do. Now, when you look at the chart, this is where they are. There's the R1s, the R2s, R3s, R4, all based on employees' readiness. The management skills we're going to talk about here in a minute. The leadership skills, according to our good friend, is the four categories. S1 is delegating, S2 participating, S3 selling, S4 talking. S1, of course, is the best level. That's the level where we really are beginning to trust our employees to do the things that they need to do. So going back to the chart, when you look at the readiness index, remember R1 is the lowest. That means that those folks are low capability, low motivation. R4 is the best. S1 is the best leadership style that works the best for most folks in that it is delegating, and it goes this way. This is the telling. This is where you have to physically tell people what they have to do. And so according to Hersey and Blanchard, when you are here in these quadrant, you're overleading, and here you are underleading. So that's a part of your leadership style. So what are the appropriate styles for each level? According to Blanchard, Hersey and Blanchard, the R1s, the low performing and unwilling, the best style for them is the S1. Going back, right here, tell them what to do. You know what? I think I got my chart. I did. Look at this. No one caught this. These are backwards. I'll correct that. Those are different order. Sorry, guys. If they are an R2, the best response, of course, is a S2. Sell them, get them motivated, tell them why they need to do this, and then develop that relationship. This also talks about the relationship that you have with folks. If they are low performing and unwilling, then you're going to have a lot of high tasks telling them what to do and a lot of low relationship, because you're not going to be able to develop and spend a lot of time having to take care of folks like that. The low moderate, they are low, they're moderate R2, that means they're insecure, but they might be willing. This is where you've got a great relationship, because you're going to spend a lot of time, but you're going to develop a lot of relationships, because these are really people that are going to be great future followers, great future people in your building, because they really are motivated. They really, really want it. But because they don't have some of the skills or they're insecure, you're going to have to spend a lot of time with them to get them there. The R3s, the moderate to high, these are people that are able to do it, just unwilling, they're lazy, they're insecure. You are going to have to spend a lot of time with these, and you're not going to have a lot of time to spend relationships with them. You're just basically going to have to make sure that they are doing what they have to do. The relationship piece is more of how much you're going to invest in developing them. For the high flyers, the readiness and the ability, they're able and they're willing, then of course you're going to be the delegating. These folks, you won't have to have too much of a relationship with them and not too much telling them what to do with the task. These folks are your high flyers. They're going to do well no matter what you ask them to do. All right, now, that was an example of that. Now, this is a terrible example, but it's the only one I could find that was really spelled out for us in the directive versus non-directive education. And it takes into, the topic is sex education. And I know my elementary folks don't do this, and I know my high school folks probably don't as well, but this is an example given by Leanne Bean, who did this as a research project. So she tried to compare, because I wanted to find an example, a clear example of directive and non-directive approaches with teachers. And so I don't like the topic, and I'll try to find another one before the next class I teach, but the topic is sex education. So if you've got a child in the room, you may want to cover their ears. We're not going to talk about anything terrible, but I wanted to give you an example of directive versus non-directive. Again, the topic, sex education and how you teach it. In a directive, in a situation like this, the teacher she's given the guidelines, the standards, the lessons, the reasons. The non-directive, the teacher is the facilitator. And any of these topics, you could follow that. In the directive, knowledge is for prevention. Non-directive is for awareness. The directive approach believes that knowledge alone is not enough, that you have to give them clear directions as well. The non-directive approach is that knowledge is the key. information and awareness, more information and more awareness. A clear message is always given. There is, I mean, it's black and white. There is no neutral position. And here, I mean, and it would be, abstinence for that one. And for here, it would be that you can talk and discuss sex education without the moral distinctions. The affective, truth dominates. The affective, it's all about emotions. The classroom can be a place where teens can be exposed to expected standards of behavior. And here, for the non-directive, the classroom is just one of many places that students should be getting their directions for specific behavior. I really am not liking this particular model, but hey, it really does do a great job of describing directive and non-directive. So in a directive, the decision-making skills, they are taught through a directive. They have to be taught. There's judgment. There's again, I'm in the directive for behaviors. There's not judgment of persons. You talk about the risk, you talk about the abstinence, and there is that one end goal of abstinence. For the non-directed, the decision-making, you are really trying to work there to give the kids decision-making so they can make the options for themselves. So you encourage them, enabling them to make the appropriate decisions. Non-judgmental, you discuss, of course, options for them as well, and you present abstinence as yet one of several options. So, any questions thus far? Terrible example. If anybody's got a better one for me next time, please share it with me. Because I don't like, is that a chat? Because I don't like that one at all. All right. I mentioned this earlier, but I know, Jason, you joined us, 2 new resources on 605. Are there any questions for me on those 2 chapters of the book?
No, sir. Not for
Yeah.
me.
Yes. I did not hear the question.
I don't have a question, Dr. Stone.
Okay. All right. Well, I have, that's pretty much what I wanted to do tonight. Wanted to remind you also about Dean Bull's Ask Dean Bull session on October 24th, a Zoom session, 7 o'clock. You are invited to that. And of course, October 15th, Jason, I think you missed this, but if you have not already told the graduate school that you want to March in December, or it's the last day to apply to be a December graduate. So that's for everyone. So if you haven't done that, I'll go ahead and give a call to the registrar's office. All right, our next class is next Thursday on the 18th. And I also mentioned, I think I mentioned this at the very beginning too. I'm going to add a little, since this is all done by online, I would like to add a little section here at the end that if you want to stick around, I'm here. I'll be around to talk with you about any issues or anything going on in the school. I'd like to use it every session for at the end, that if people want to leave and you've got things to do, great. But if you'd like to stick around and ask questions or somehow have a conversation about something going on in your life or your schools, I'll be glad to do that as well. So I'm going to stop recording. Wish everyone a good evening. And if anyone wants to stick around and have conversations and be a part of a conversation, I will stick around for a while unless you're all gone. Don't feel the need to do that. It will not hurt my feelings one way or the other. But if you want to, I think that's I enjoyed our conversations last week and would enjoy that opportunity. I know, hope all of you have been safe around the hurricane. This is like 2 months or a month. So hope everyone's having a great week. And I'm going to stop recording. Wait. You don't have any electricity? Ugh. Got it now. Good deal. Good deal. All right. All right. I'm going to stop recording. Any questions before we cut out? And I'll stick around for a little while.
No.
All right. Well, you all stay dry and don't get in any kind of trouble.
Thank you, Dr. Stone. Good night.
We'll see you next week. Let's see. Stop recording.